After my husband passed away from a heart attack, I found a thick stack of intimate photos next to his diary, from his 20s to his 50s. It was always the same woman. The diary was filled with page after page of explicit, passionate confessions. All those years, he had spent his long, lonely nights with those photographs. My husband's body was injured, and his function was impaired. Out of consideration for him, I spent 30 years in a sexless marriage without a single regret. So it wasn't that he couldn't, it was that he couldn't with me. My hand trembled, and the photos scattered all over the floor. My adopted son picked up the photo with a strange look on his face. "Auntie, this is disgusting," he said. "How could you keep a photo like this of my mother? No wonder Dad never liked you." I was so furious, I could have died on the spot. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the eve of my wedding to my late husband. The boat capsized. Help. As the icy river water closed over my mouth and nose, I realized I had been reborn. Wu Hongbing and I had gone to town to buy wedding supplies, and the boat capsized on our way back. Wu Hongbing had intended to rescue his neighbor's younger sister, Sun Xiuyan, but I held him back with all my strength. By the time he returned to save her, Sun Xiuyan had nearly drowned. From then on, her health deteriorated. Filled with guilt, I looked after her in every way I could. I never imagined my husband would remain chaste his entire life for the woman he calls his sister. It turned my over 30 years of marriage with him into a complete farce. This time, let the star-crossed lovers finally be together. After drowning in my past life, I made a point of learning to swim and have since become an expert swimmer. Seeing Wu Hongbing beside me swimming desperately towards Sun Xiuyan, I turned and swam in the opposite direction, not far away. A mother and her son were panicking and screaming for help, clinging desperately to the man who was trying to rescue them. As all three were about to go under, I knocked the violently struggling woman unconscious with a swift chop to the neck. After saving the woman and child, I was about to head for shore when I realized the man had sunk beneath the surface and disappeared. After hesitating for 3 seconds, I resignedly turned back. Only when I dragged him to the shore did I notice the thick bandages wrapped around his arms and torso were stained red with blood. The man appeared to be in his 30s, with handsome features and a slender build. The most infuriating part was that this grown man had eyelashes longer than mine. Seeing he had stopped breathing, I immediately began performing CPR. After a long moment, he finally coughed, expelling the water from his lungs. I breathed a sigh of relief. A crowd had gathered around us. However, pointing and whispering, "How shameless, they're actually kissing." I know, and their clothes are all undone, and it's not even dark yet. With so many people watching, they're just hugging and clinging to each other, not even trying to be discreet. Couples these days have no shame at all. I twitched the corner of my mouth. I'd actually forgotten, this was the 1970s, an era where a man and woman holding hands meant they had to get married. I can't believe I just gave mouth to a complete stranger in front of all these people. I turned and shouted at the onlookers, "What are you all gawking at? There are still people in the river, go help them." The crowd immediately scattered, rushing to see the commotion at the river. The man sat up, now very close to me. A wave of raw, potent pheromones hit me, igniting a flush of heat from within that inexplicably colored my cheeks. It finally dawned on me that I was currently inhabiting the body of an 18-year-old girl. The man fixed his deep-set eyes on me, his voice hoarse as he said, "Thank you for saving me. If you don't mind, I'll take responsibility for you." Gu Xizha, from Group 1, 4th Brigade, Qinghe Village, unmarried, only son, both parents living. The man's words were brief and firm as he stated his situation. I was about to answer when a sharp voice rang out not far away, "Ji Xinghe, Xinghe. Where are you?" Gritting my teeth, I said to the man, "I don't need you to take responsibility. Worry about yourself first, you're covered in injuries." Seeing the bandage on his stomach completely soaked with blood, I pulled a few newly bought handkerchiefs from my pocket and began bandaging him up. My old nurse's instincts from a past life were kicking in again. I didn't go through all that trouble to save someone just to watch them bleed out. Once everything was settled, I dusted off my hands, stood up, and announced as I left, "My name is Ji Xinghe." I approached Wu Hongbing, who was holding a trembling Sun Xiuyan in his arms, anxiously scanning our surroundings. Seeing me appear, he let out a sigh of relief, then snapped in annoyance, "Where on earth have you been? I've been calling for you. You had us worried sick." "I've got the basket back. Hurry up and find some clothes for Xiuyan to put on. She's freezing." Sun Xiuyan's little face was deathly pale, and she was shivering. "No need, Brother Hongbing, Sister Xinghe fell in the river too. let her wear it. Seeing Sun Xiuyan again, my feelings were complicated. Remembering those photos from my past life, my face darkened. The clothes in the bag are all soaked. What's the point of putting them on? Are you two out of your minds? Just get home, quick. I shouldered the basket and walked off. This dowry was prepared for me by my parents. Since I no longer wish to marry Wu Hongbing, I'll naturally be taking it all back with me. When we reached the village entrance, Wu Hongbing hemmed and hawed before saying, Xinghe, could we let Xiuyan use that thermos for now? Winter is coming, and she's not in good health. Having a hot water bottle would make things easier for her. I stared at him wide-eyed. In my past life, because he had saved me first, I felt guilty and handed the thermos over to Sun Xiuyan without a second thought. But this time I didn't even get involved with him. And he still had the nerve to make such a demand. I raised my voice. This is part of my dowry, and you want me to just give it away? Sun Xiuyan's face went pale. She shook her head repeatedly, tugging at Wu Hongbing's sleeve. Brother Hongbing, I can't accept this. It belongs to your wife. After speaking, she was seized by a fit of violent coughing, yet her eyes remained fixed on that thermos. Wu Hongbing said angrily, Xinghe, we're about to get married. Why are you still drawing lines between us? Xiuyan and I grew up together. She's like a sister to me, as her future sister-in-law. What's the big deal about giving her a thermos? I seized the moment and retorted, Wu Hongbing, we're not even married yet, and you're already scolding me over an outsider. You treat strangers better than you treat me. I don't want to marry you anymore. We haven't even registered our marriage anyway. We're through. I turned and strode towards home, my basket on my back. From behind me came Sun Xiuyan's voice, Brother Hongbing, go and explain things to Sister Xinghe. You two are about to be married. Don't let a silly quarrel over me ruin things. Wu Hongbing retorted, I'm not going. We're not even married yet, and she's already this jealous and possessive. What kind of freedom will I have left after we tie the knot? Hearing their conversation, I quickened my pace home. I opened the door, saw my family full of life, and immediately broke down in tears, clinging to my mother. Seeing me soaked to the bone, my mother anxiously asked what had happened. My dad and brother also gathered around me anxiously, with tears in my eyes. I told them I was fine. At dinner, I told my family I wouldn't be marrying Wu Hongbing. The whole family exchanged bewildered looks. My mother even reached out to feel my forehead. You don't have a fever, she said. Why are you talking nonsense? Ever since Hongbing came to our village, you've been following him around like a lost puppy. You helped him with the farm work, gave him eggs to eat, and even made shoes and socks for him with your own hands. You chased after him for so long, making us all blush just watching, and only then did he agree. Now, all the wedding preparations are bought and ready, and you're saying you won't go through with it. My father said earnestly, Xinghe, marriage is no child's play. Hongbing is a good lad, and we all approve of this match. We won't allow you to mess around. I pursed my lips and said that Wu Hongbing's attitude towards Sun Xiuyan was odd. The whole family laughed, and my father said, men, they naturally learn to look after their wives once they're married. A bitter ache filled my heart as I recalled the over 30 years of a sexless marriage in my past life. And a wave of resentment washed over me. Wu Hongbing was deeply in love with Sun Xiuyan, yet he still married me, treating me as nothing more than a resource to be drained. The money for his education came from my farming, and when he wanted to buy the work unit apartment, I emptied our family's savings to scrape together the funds for him. Later, when he wanted to follow in Sun Xiuyan's footsteps and study abroad, I simply couldn't come up with the money for him. And he turned completely cold towards me. At this thought, I said seriously, Mom, Dad, really, I'm not going to marry him. I plan to learn some medicine from the village doctor and become a nurse in a hospital later. After I finished speaking, my parents stared at me fixedly, then burst into laughter. My brother patted my head and said, that's the spirit, you keep at it. I'm off to bed, watching my brother's retreating figure. My eyes welled up with tears. In my past life, my brother and father went to work on the reservoir to help Wu Hongbing raise his tuition money, only to be crushed to a pulp on the spot by rocks that came tumbling down from above. When my mother saw the bodies of my father and brother, she fainted dead away and passed on not long after. Just like that, my entire family was gone. Wu Hongbing went off to school without a care, yet he looked down on me at every turn. The next day when I went to work in the fields, all the aunties in the village teased me with good-natured laughter. Xinghe, have you set the date for your big day? Your mother said last time it would be this month, so why are you still out here working the land? Xinghe, how much bride price did that educated youth Wu give your family? Are his parents coming for the wedding? listening to the aunties' incessant chattering. I cut them off. Wu and I aren't a good match. We're not getting married. The aunties' laughter only grew louder. Is the bride feeling shy? You two have been together for so long. If you don't get married, what will you do? Listening to their teasing, my heart sank like a stone. Wu Hongbing, fell for him at first sight and granted his every wish. Because of me, he barely did any farm work all those years he was sent down to the countryside. 6 months ago, I even turned into a hero, saving Wu Hongbing from the jaws of a wild boar, when he wanted to take the college entrance exam. I went to great lengths to find him study materials. When he wanted to study, I went to work the fields and his place to earn work points. Now that I don't want to marry Wu Hongbing, not a single person believes me. Wu Hongbing walked over to me with a dark expression and said, "Come with me for a moment." I didn't want to deal with him at first, but after a moment's thought, I followed him over to the large tree nearby. Wu Hongbing glared at me fiercely. "Ji Xinghe, would you stop being so dramatic? I just saved Xiuyan yesterday, and now you're calling off the wedding. You know how to swim, but she doesn't. Was I supposed to just stand there and watch her drown? Can't you be a little more reasonable? And then you sent your brother to warn me to stay away from Xiuyan. Can you please not be so petty, Ji Xinghe? If you keep this up, we're through. Don't come crying to me later." He looked down at me with an icy, arrogant expression. I let out a cold laugh. "We broke up yesterday. Don't come looking for me unless you have a good reason." As I turned away, I heard Wu Hongbing roar, "Ji Xinghe, there's a limit to this nonsense. We've been together for so long. If you won't marry me, who else would possibly want you?" I spun around in fury. I'd rather stay single for the rest of my life than ever marry a despicable, shameless man like you again. Sun Xiuyan's timid voice came from behind. "Sister Xinghe, how could you speak to Hongbing like that? You're about to get married, you should respect and cherish each other." I spat in her direction. "Who asked you to butt in? Can't you see we're having a private conversation? What's next? Will you be standing by the bed on our wedding night too?" Sun Xiuyan froze, trembling with rage as silent tears streamed down her pale face. Wu Hongbing furiously pulled Sun Xiuyan into his arms. "Xiuyan, don't be upset. A country bumpkin like her only knows how to throw a tantrum and act shamelessly. She has no idea what mutual respect and love even mean. Ji Xinghe, I'm giving you one last chance. Apologize to me and Xiuyan right now, or I swear, I'm breaking up with you." I looked at the two of them calmly and called out to the other side of the tree, "Mom, Dad, you see, Wu Hongbing doesn't care about me at all. Marrying him would never make me happy." My parents emerged from behind the tree. Their faces ashen, they glanced at the two flustered figures, then, with grim expressions, took me by the arm and led me away. A secret joy welled up inside me. This time, surely they wouldn't force me to marry him. After we got home, my family never brought up the marriage arrangement with Wu Hongbing again. As for him, he treated me with cold indifference, acting as if I didn't exist. I know exactly what he's doing. He's trying to wear me down with the silent treatment. In my past life, he used the same tactic on me all the time, but in this life, I couldn't care less. I thought we were completely over for good. To my surprise, just a few days later, Wu Hongbing showed up at my house with an admission letter in hand, leading a whole crowd of people. He looked up at me and declared, "I got into Tsinghua University. I'm leaving for school soon. If you're willing to marry me, you'd better get ready quickly. I'm about to head off to campus." Sun Xiuyan followed behind him with a beaming smile. "Sister Xinghe, I got in too. Don't worry, even though you can't go to school, I'll keep an eye on Brother Hongbing for you." The villagers chimed in cheerfully from the sidelines. They're saying our family must have had some incredible luck bestowed upon us by our ancestors to have found such a wonderful son-in-law. They also said I was being utterly ungrateful for making such a fuss and refusing to marry Wu Hongbing a while back. One of the aunties said, "Xinghe, your family should hurry up and prepare a better dowry. If you don't marry him soon, someone else will snatch this top scholar away." Exactly, what on earth is Xinghe making a fuss about? He's the top scholar. If she won't marry someone like him, who on earth does she think she's going to marry? My father carefully took Wu Hongbing's admission letter, his face lighting up with joy. "She'll marry you." Right away, a smug look flashed across Wu Hongjuan's face. "Uncle, you see for yourself, I got into a top-tier university." Xinghe, on the other hand, only finished junior high. She's not really my match, but we've been together for a while, and Xinghe even saved my life once. I'm an educated man, and I know how to be grateful. I won't let her down. I still need Xinghe's support to get through university, so, Could her dowry be converted into cash instead? Hearing him repeat the same words from my past life, all the humiliation and resentment from that time welled up in my heart again. I won't marry him, I cried out. I'd rather die than marry him. My father was so furious, smoke practically billowed from his head. He raised his hand to strike me. Wu Hongbing said with contempt, Xinghe, stop making a scene, we've been together for so long. If you don't marry me, who else would have you marry me? A tall, straight-backed figure strode in from outside the door. It's Gu Xizhe, he said to me calmly. Xinghe, I'm here. The marriage application took some time, so I'm late. It's been approved now. Shall we go get our marriage certificate? He was a head taller than me. When he lowered his head to speak, his presence seemed to envelop me completely. For a moment, my mouth went completely dry. I was so flustered I could barely speak. Okay, yes, let's go get the marriage license right now. Wu Hongbing's eyes reddened as he shouted, Ji Xinghe, who is he? You're sneaking around with some other guy behind my back. Do I even mean anything to you? I said sternly. I've already told you, we're broken up. Who I marry is none of your business, Wu Hongbing yelled. I don't agree to this. Sun Xiuyan frowned. Sister Xinghe, you can't just find some random guy to make Hongbing jealous because you're having a spat with him. Marriage is a lifelong commitment, not a game. You're being so irresponsible, I scoffed. My business is none of Wu Hongbing's concern, and it's certainly none of yours. Sun Xiuyan was left speechless and said nothing more. The neighbor auntie said with grave concern, Xinghe, who is this? None of us have ever seen him before. How can you be marrying him just like that? Exactly, Xinghe. This man looks so much older than you, and by the looks of it, he's just some country bumpkin. What are you thinking, passing up a fine scholar, a top graduate, to marry a peasant? Wu Hongbing looked at Gu Xizhe with contempt. Xinghe, if you want to spite me, at least find someone better than me. I'm going to Tsinghua or Peking University. This guy probably doesn't even have a proper city job, does he? And he's so old, he could almost be your father, and you actually want to marry him. My father and mother's brows were deeply furrowed. I stood firmly by Gu Xizhe's side, holding his hand. Yes, I am going to marry him. So what if he's not a university graduate? So what if he's older than me? When he marries me, I'll be the only one in his heart. Unlike some people who talk about marrying me while carrying someone else in their heart, that's a lie. Sun Xiuyan hastily defended herself. Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, she lowered her head. Brother Hongbing really does like you, otherwise, why would he have accepted your advances? She turned to Gu Xizhe. This, sir, Xinghe is Brother Hongbing's girlfriend. They're about to get married. They've just had a little disagreement recently because of me. You should go back and stay out of this. Gu Xizhe ignored her and turned to my father. Uncle, hello, my name is Gu Xizhe. It's our first meeting, and I apologize for the intrusion. This is a gift I prepared for you. He called out toward the door. Bring them in. 8 young men carried in 8 large wicker baskets. The baskets were filled with rice, flour, cooking oil, meat, several chickens and ducks, 6 sets of clothing, and an assortment of other items. As the 8 young men laid out the items one by one, the murmurs of conversation gradually died down. My mother and my brother hurried back from the fields. What's going on? Why are there so many people here? When she saw the array of gifts on the ground, her face lit up with a smile. Hongbing, you brought so much for the proposal. You said your home was far away and your family had burdens, that you couldn't prepare a betrothal gift. Why bring so many things? They're far too generous. Please, take some of it back. Wu Hongbing's face flushed a deep crimson. A snicker rippled through the crowd. I quickly tugged on Gu Xizhe's sleeve and said, Mom, Hongbing didn't bring these. My boyfriend did. My mother stared blankly. This, your boyfriend? But your boyfriend isn't he? Her finger wagged back and forth between Gu Xizhe and Wu Hongbing. Sun Xiuyan said with displeasure, Sister Xinghe, the whole village knows you're seeing Brother Hongbing. Now you're going to marry someone else. Isn't that just leading him on? Wu Hongbing stepped forward and grabbed my wrist tightly, his anger boiling over. Ji Xinghe, you're toying with my feelings. I'm going to report you. Just as I tried to struggle free, a strong hand pulled Wu Hongbing's grip away. Comrade Ji isn't married yet. I have every right to pursue her. Someone in the crowd, eager to stir the pot, shouted, a sought-after daughter has many suitors. Comrade Wu, didn't you say Xinghe liked you? Why don't you propose too, and see who she chooses? Hey, I'm just saying. Where's this new son-in-law from, and what does he do for a living? Gu Xizhe said in a low, firm voice. Gu Xizhe, from Group 1, 4th Brigade, Qinghe Village, 38 years old, unmarried, only son, both parents alive and well, currently at home, what, 38, that old, he's a full 19 years older than Xinghe, the villagers murmured amongst themselves. Sure, the family looks well off, bringing all those betrothal gifts, but he's still just a farmer at the end of the day. How much of a fortune could he really have? Exactly, I think Xinghe's got a screw loose. She's turning down a promising university student for some country bumpkin. If she were my daughter, I'd break her legs. Hearing this, Wu Hongbing straightened his clothes with confidence and thrust the notice forward. Xinghe, I may not have much in the way of material wealth, but I know that true richness comes from spiritual fulfillment. Xinghe, you are my most suitable comrade in arms and life partner. Please marry me. I offer this marriage notice as my pledge, and promise you a bright future together. Sun Xiuyan, looking deeply moved, began to clap. Brother Hongbing speaks so well. As long as our spirits aren't impoverished, even the harshest conditions can bear the most beautiful flowers. Following her lead, a smattering of applause broke out. Everyone else fell silent. Not uttering a word, I looked at Gu Xizhe. He merely glanced at me and said, I don't understand all this talk about spiritual richness or poverty. All I know is the old saying, a woman marries a man for clothing and food. I can't promise to shield you from every storm for a lifetime. What I can do is promise to use every ounce of my strength to fulfill your wishes and take good care of you and your family, Wu Hongbing said with disdain. How materialistic. Xinghe is not that shallow. I shot him a glance. You're wrong. I am exactly that materialistic. In my past life, I toiled for decades for these so-called material comforts, only to be looked down upon by him in the end for not having a slender, alluring figure. I endured over 30 years of a sexless marriage with him, and what did I get for it in the end? Given a second chance at life, I'd rather choose this burly farmer who works the land at home. At least he knows how to be grateful and isn't an ungrateful wretch, I said to Gu Xizhe with a beaming smile. I'd love to marry you. Let's go get our marriage license. My father quickly stepped in to stop me. Gee Xinghe, don't be ridiculous. How long have you even known Comrade Gu, and you're already talking about marriage? I counted on my fingers. About 10 days, I guess. We've met 3 times. That's plenty. The people around us gasped in shock. My mother jabbed a finger at my forehead and yelled, I won't allow it. Gee Xinghe, you've got some nerve. You'd marry someone you've only met 3 times. I held Gu Xizhe's hand and declared, yes, some people just click instantly. It's love at first sight. I love him, and I'm going to marry him. A faint smile appeared on Gu Xizhe's serious face as he tightened his grip on my hand. A warmth spread from our joined palms, and I caught the faint, clean scent of soap. My ears began to burn. I turned and saw a faint blush creeping onto the man's suntanned face. I was even more pleased. There's nothing I like more than a bashful older man. Of course, we couldn't just go and get the marriage license today. My parents invited Gu Xizhe and the 8 other young men to stay for a hearty meal. My father said to Gu Xizhe with a hint of apology, you're a fine young man, it's just that my daughter, though pretty, is rather fickle and impulsive. Who knows if she'll change her mind by tomorrow morning. I chided him. Dad, how can you talk about your own daughter like that? I told you. I'm going to marry him. That's my final decision for life. Gu Xizhe understood the underlying meaning of my father's words. After the meal, he left the gifts behind and departed. I went to see him off, and on the way, he said to me, you can change your mind anytime before we get the marriage certificate. Consider those things a token of my gratitude for saving me, but once we're married, I hope you'll be fully committed. I smiled and told him I won't change my mind. Under the moonlight, I rose on my tiptoes and planted a gentle kiss on his cheek. Gu Xizhe was taken aback for a moment. Even in the faint moonlight, I could see his face quickly flush red. I was smiling at him when he cupped the back of my head and kissed me deeply. When the kiss ended, I was left breathless and dizzy. In my past life, Wu Hongbing had never kissed me like that. So this is what a real kiss feels like. At that thought, tears began to fall. Seeing me cry, Gu Xizhe panicked instantly. What's wrong? I'm sorry, that was too forward of me. I apologize. I pulled him closer. It's only polite to return the favor. With that, I kissed him, feeling the change in his body. I lowered my head in shyness. Gu Xizhe hurried away, but not before saying to me, I'll pick you up tomorrow morning to get our marriage license. At the first light of dawn the next day, I quietly got up and slipped out of the house. Under the tree by my front door, someone was already standing there. His eyes lit up when he saw me. Have you made up your mind? I gave a firm nod. We didn't get home until the afternoon, and the moment we stepped inside, we were met with 3 pairs of furious, glaring eyes. My mom pulled out a feather duster. "You troublesome girl, you vanished first thing in the morning, where on earth have you been?" When they saw Gusija standing beside me, their expressions turned even more hostile. My mom said, "Comrade Gu, this is a family matter. Would you mind coming back a little later?" I said triumphantly, "Since it's a family matter, Comrade Gu should definitely stay." "Look, what's this?" Seeing the marriage certificate I produced, my parents were stunned. "You got the license. How could you just go and get married? You two are going to be the death of me." My mother's feather duster came swinging towards me. Gusija pulled me aside, and the duster landed squarely on him instead. It was just the end of the workday. The neighbors gathered around again to see what was happening. "I heard you got the marriage certificate, Xinghe. Did you really marry this gentleman?" I introduced him to the crowd with a beaming smile. "Uncles and aunties, this is Gusija, my lawful husband. We'll invite you all to the wedding banquet another day." Everyone was stunned. "So you're really marrying this country bumpkin and giving up on Wu Jiqing?" An auntie suddenly slapped her thigh and exclaimed joyfully, "Oh my! What wonderful news, Sui Sui, my dear girl, didn't you have a thing for Wu Jiqing? Quick, go on." The families with daughters exchanged glances and then quietly dispersed. They used to envy my good eye for spotting a promising prospect like Wu Hongbing and investing in him from the very beginning. Now, they just think I'm blind. Throwing away a pearl in my hand to pick up a fish eye, my parents slumped to the ground, their eyes vacant. My brother let out a deep sigh. "Little sister, you'll have to work hard for your work points from now on." Gusija pursed his lips. "Xinghe doesn't need to work the fields. If she's willing, she can come with me to the army post." "What? Military family accompaniment?" My parents perked up instantly. Gusija said, "I'm a regimental level officer. Since I've earned merit this time, I should be able to apply for a family accompaniment spot." "Regimental level, what's that?" The relatives, having heard the news of my marriage, crowded into my house. They were absolutely stunned when they found out Gusija was not only a soldier but a regimental level officer. Well, I was the most shocked one of all. Why didn't you tell me you were a regimental commander?" "I guessed you were a soldier, but I never imagined your rank was so high." Gusija's expression turned serious. "You don't like it?" I laughed. "I do, of course I like it. What a wonderful surprise." Gusija had spent all these years in the military, missing the prime time to settle down. There was no childhood sweetheart or unrequited love waiting for him back home. He's my ideal partner in every way. My parents were beaming with joy, holding Gusija's hands and grinning from ear to ear, even after learning he had returned home to recuperate from an illness. They insisted on catching 2 of our old hens for him to take home. Gusija declined, saying that today was too rushed just to get the marriage certificate, and they hadn't even held the proper ceremonies. Tomorrow, he would bring his parents over to our house to discuss the wedding arrangements. As I listened to them finalize a wedding date that was getting closer and closer, I kept a straight face, but inside, my heart was bursting with joy. So this old man wasn't as composed as he appeared on the surface. That evening, Wu Hongbing, his eyes rimmed red, cornered me at the end of the village. "Ji Xinghe, how could you do this?" Toying with my feelings. "You were the one who pursued me first, and now you're the one abandoning me. Do you have no conscience at all?" I looked at him coolly. "It's true I pursued you, but you never developed feelings for me. You don't like me. If we stayed together, we'd only end up a miserable, resentful couple." Wu Hongbing clenched his fists. "Whether I like you or not, I've already agreed to marry you. I already see you as my wife. You're abandoning me after leading me on. This is deception." I stepped closer to him. "You agreed, so I have to marry you. You don't even like me. What right do you have to ruin my life?" "Wu Hongbing, do you really want me to lay bare your despicable intentions? You want to marry me because I can help you with the farm work? Because I can bring you meat and eggs? Because I've been completely obedient to you, and more importantly, because you're going to university and want me to pay your tuition and living expenses?" Wu Hongbing hurriedly denied it. "No, I really do like you, Xinghe. Divorce that big oaf and marry me instead. I promise I'll treat you well." As he spoke, he moved closer and started getting handsy with me. I raised my hand, ready to slap him, but then I saw him fly backward like a sack of rice. Gusija's gaze was heavy. "You're a soon-to-be college student. You should know what the crime of undermining a military marriage entails." "Hongbing, are you okay?" Sun Shuyan cried out in alarm as she rushed over to help Wu Hongbing up. I stared blankly at Gusija. "What are you doing here?" "Don't believe a word he says." "I believe you. "You're my wife," Gu Xizhe declared firmly. Sun Xiuyan helped Wu Hongbing to his feet, tilting her delicate pale face upward as she protested in a coquettish tone. "Even if you are the regiment commander, you can't just hit people like that," Gu Xizhe stated gravely. "I am punishing a man who harassed my wife." The color drained from both their faces. Wu Hongbing and Sun Xiuyan became the talk of the town. All the unmarried men and women in the village flocked to their side. They were cautious and guarded, but Sun Xiuyan was still pushed into the river. Several men rushed to save her, but in the end, it was the village good-for-nothing who pulled her out. He made a big fuss, clamoring for Sun Xiuyan to marry him. Fortunately, the village leaders were fair-minded. Upon learning that Sun Xiuyan would rather die than marry the layabout, they told him to stop pursuing her. After being reprimanded a few times, the ne'er-do-well finally gave up. Yet, many fine young men from good families were still vying for her attention with great enthusiasm. Wu Hongbing had handkerchiefs thrust upon him by several girls, and some even tried to set up a honey trap to force him into marriage. There were also families who promised to fund his university education if he married their daughter and had a child with her. The village was abuzz with activity every day, all for the sake of their two prized phoenix eggs who got into top-tier universities. It was either young men getting into fights or girls pulling each other's hair. Even the village cadres were fed up to the back teeth, telling them to either leave for school or find someone to marry. Just as I was wondering what choice the two of them would make, they went and got married in a flash. Wu Hongbing said to me with a face full of happiness, "Ji Xinghe, I thank you for the humiliation you gave me, as it made me see my own heart clearly. The person I've always loved is Xiuyan, and Xiuyan loves me deeply too. We will be happy together." The sight of his face made me sick. Before they even started school, Gu Xizhe and I had our wedding. At the wedding, the elderly Gu couple looked at me with beaming smiles. They had waited so long for Gu Xizhe to settle down, almost to the point of despair. Their son had gotten married so quickly. After all, at my wedding, almost everyone from the village showed up, including Wu Hongbing and Sun Xiuyan, who arrived hand in hand. Watching our joyous celebration, their faces turned ashen, then green with envy. Wu Hongbing was the second son in his family, with several younger siblings below him. His father was the sole breadwinner, working as a laborer. His family couldn't afford his university tuition, let alone fund a wedding for him. Sun Xiuyan's family background was considered undesirable, so no one from her family ever sent her any money. All these years, the reason she managed to live comfortably in the countryside was because of Wu Hongbing. This time, I won't be there to be their personal ATM. I'm curious to see if their love will still be as passionate, all-consuming, and soul-stirring as it was in their past life, but I soon ran out of energy to pay them any mind. That old man had way too much stamina. I was sore and exhausted every day, barely able to get out of bed. 2 weeks later, all the educated youths from the village who had passed the college entrance exams left for university. However, while I was strolling through the village, I ran into Wu Hongbing. I asked in astonishment, "Why are you still here? Why haven't you left for school?" Wu Hongbing's face turned ashen. A fellow educated youth quietly told me that Sun Xiuyan had stolen all of Wu Hongbing's money and train ticket and left for the university early. Wu Hongbing had no money left to buy a train ticket to school. He asked everyone in the village, but no one was willing to lend him any money. He had no choice but to stay and keep working. I boarded the train to join the army. Gu Xizhe found a doctor in the military district to be my mentor, so I could learn medicine from him. 2 years later, through my own hard work, I got into medical school. I left my child with Gu Xizhe's parents and went off to university. On the rare occasions I returned to the village and saw Wu Hongbing, he had completely transformed into a farmer. I heard that Sun Xiuyan came back and divorced him. Wu Hongbing wanted to go to university again, but he just couldn't get in, no matter how hard he tried. The village girls who were once so keen on him had all gotten married. I let out a long sigh. Good, in his past life, he could remain chaste and devoted for Sun Xiuyan. Well, he can just keep on doing that in this one. Story 2. Ah, a short, piercing scream tore through the chaos, violently yanking me back to the world of the living. Not the cold, hard impact of a fall. It was a hospital. "It's a delivery bed." Awake, a woman's voice devoid of warmth sounded above my head. A nurse wearing a mask was adjusting the speed of the fore-drip, her movements efficient to the point of indifference. "The anesthesia has worn off. Pain is normal. Just bear with it. A miscarriage still requires postpartum care. Don't take it lightly." She glanced at me, her eyes empty of emotion. as if stating the most mundane fact, miscarriage. The word seared into my heart like a red-hot iron. The pain suddenly became excruciatingly clear, merging with the icy agony of being pushed off a high-rise in my past life, shattering every bone in my body. A violent wave of nausea surged in my stomach, and I abruptly turned my head to retch into the chipped enamel basin by the bed, only to spit out a few mouthfuls of bitter, acidic fluid. At that moment, the pale green wooden door of the ward was gently pushed open. A tall, straight figure blocked the light from the doorway. Stepping in with a chill from the outdoors, his dark green military uniform was impeccably pressed, and the star insignia on his shoulder straps, denoting his rank as battalion commander, gleamed coldly under the fluorescent light. It was Ezra Gu. In his hands, he held an equally chipped enamel mug, steam rising in wisps, blurring the sharp lines of his jaw. He walked to the bedside with light steps, placing the mug on the small nightstand with a faint clink. "Good to see you awake," he said. His voice deep and steady, carrying the characteristic composure of a soldier, yet tinged with a barely detectable weariness. He leaned down slightly, as if about to reach out and check my forehead. I instinctively recoiled violently, my back slamming heavily against the cold iron bed rail with a dull thud. The movement tugged at the wound on my abdomen, and the sharp pain made me gasp instantly. A fine layer of cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. Ezra Gu's hand froze mid-air, his thick, dark eyebrows furrowing almost imperceptibly. He withdrew his hand, his gaze sweeping over my deathly pale, sweat-covered face before finally settling on the cup of steaming brown sugar water. "Drink something warm," he said, picking up the enamel mug and handing it to me. His tone softened further, yet carried an undeniable, almost commanding reassurance. "Warm yourself up." The reddish-brown liquid sloshed inside the white enamel, emitting a sickly sweet aroma. My gaze bypassed that nauseating cup of sugar water, locking onto Ezra Gu's face. That face, handsome, resolute, had once been the entirety of my youthful radiance, but now, every sharp angle reflected with cruel clarity the foolishness and blood-soaked tears of my past life. It was his repeated consideration, it was his ever-struggling widowed sister-in-law Lena Liu, who ultimately pushed me into the abyss. In my past life, it was on this very hospital bed that I endured the heart-wrenching pain and the despair of losing my child, drinking the cup of sugar water he personally handed to me, only to hear him say those words with earnest gravity. "Mira," Ezra Gu's voice indeed rang out, low and carrying his usual attempt at patient reasoning. Each word was like a poisoned ice needle, precisely piercing my already battered heart. "I know you're hurting. The child is gone, I'm in pain too, but Sister Lena, she's a widow with a child. It's only been a few months since Jijun passed. She was just flustered today and lost her balance, accidentally bumping into you." His voice paused, as if carefully choosing his words, his gaze locking onto me with an invisible pressure, demanding that I consider the bigger picture. "She's a woman raising a child all on her own. It's really not easy. You, try to be more understanding, don't make a scene." "Alright, understanding, what, in her past life?" When Lena Liu pushed her off the building, that face twisted with jealousy and hatred, Ezra Gu's eyes that unhesitatingly chose to believe Lena's tearful lies, and now, this cup of brown sugar water reeking of hypocritical sweetness, along with his words about how hard it's been for Lena Liu. Boom, the thread of reason in her mind, overwhelmed by towering hatred and icy despair, snapped instantly. All the pretense, all the restraint, all the grievances and resentments accumulated from past lives were ignited in this moment, burning into a blaze that consumed everything. Consideration. I abruptly raised my head, my voice hoarse as if sandpaper were grating, yet sharp as ice, piercing straight at Ezra Gu. "Battalion Commander Gu, what exactly do you want me to consider? That she accidentally caused me to lose my 3-month-old child, or that because she's a widow with a child, she can rightfully steal my man and take over my home?" My voice suddenly rose sharply, like a chipped blade scraping out a harsh noise in the deathly silent ward. The patient and their family in the next bed held their breath in shock, and even the nurse paused her work, staring at us in astonishment. Ezra Gu's face darkened instantly, as if covered in frost. He clearly hadn't expected me, usually docile, even somewhat timid, to suddenly erupt. Nor had he anticipated that I would so bluntly and sharply tear off that veil of decency. His jaw tightened, and his eyes turned sharp and cold in an instant, exuding the authority of a military man. "Mira Lin, watch your words. What nonsense about stealing a man and taking over a home? Lena is a woman of impeccable integrity, pure and blameless." It sounded like the most absurd joke in the world to me. A hoarse, broken laugh escaped my throat, yet tears streamed uncontrollably down my face, mingling with cold sweat and a wretched mess. If Lena Lou were truly blameless, she wouldn't be wandering around the living room in your shirt in the middle of the night. She wouldn't have deliberately knocked over the chicken soup I spent all afternoon making, scalding herself, only to turn around and cry over Jijun's portrait for you to see. She wouldn't have whispered in your ear every day while I was pregnant, lamenting how pitiful Jijun was without a father and how cruel I, the stepmother, was. I spat out every word in one breath, each syllable dripping with bloody accusations and the venom of a past life. The hospital room was so silent you could hear a pin drop, save for my ragged breathing. Ezra Gu's face turned ashen, his eyes churning with shock, offended fury, and a trace of something almost imperceptibly flustered. He took a sudden step forward, his towering frame radiating an overwhelming pressure, his voice barely containing thunderous rage. Mira Lin, have you lost your mind? Shut up, how dare you spout such nonsense? Do you even realize? I don't. I cut him off sharply, my gaze like a poisoned dagger, meeting his furious stare without flinching. All I know is that my child is gone, murdered by your poor, struggling sister-in-law, and you, the father, are standing here asking me to show her sympathy. Ezra Gu, where is your heart? Did a dog eat it, or has it swollen from soaking in Lena Lou's crocodile tears? You, Ezra Gu trembled with rage at my direct address and scathing accusations, veins bulging at his temples. He abruptly raised his hand, as if to stop my hysterics. At the moment his palm lifted, the last trace of warmth in my eyes extinguished completely. Enough. To waste even one more second entangled with such scum would be a desecration of life itself. All the anger, accusations, and resentment collapsed and solidified in an instant under the weight of extreme hatred, turning into a deathly, icy silence. I didn't even glance at him again. My right hand suddenly shot up, swift as lightning, and seized the plastic 4-tube on the back of my left hand. Without the slightest hesitation, my nails dug deep into my flesh as I yanked it out with all my strength. Thud, the needle was yanked out of the blue vein, dragging a string of tiny blood droplets behind it. A distinct red dot instantly appeared on the back of the hand, from which a crimson bead of blood quickly welled up. It trickled down the pale wrist and dripped onto the pristine white bedsheet, blooming into a small, glaring red plum blossom. The sharp pain struck, yet it was nothing compared to the agony in my heart, not even 1/10,000th of it. Ezra Gu's pupils contracted violently in shock at my sudden action, his hand frozen mid-air. I gave him no time to react. With my left hand, I flung aside the thin, disinfectant-scented blanket covering me, and the frigid air instantly enveloped my body. Clad only in a flimsy hospital gown, the excruciating pain in my abdomen felt like a steel blade twisting inside, and my legs were so weak they could barely hold me up. Gritting my teeth, the metallic taste of blood heavy on my tongue, I forced myself to move off the cold metal bed, fueled by a hatred that burned everything to ashes. My feet stepped onto the icy terrazzo floor, the biting cold shooting straight from my soles to the crown of my head. My body swayed uncontrollably for a moment. Mira Lin, what are you doing? Ezra Gu finally snapped out of it, growling as he reached out to steady me. Get away. I violently slapped aside his outstretched hand with such force that I staggered myself, my voice hoarse and icy. Like a frigid wind howling from the depths of hell, my gaze locked onto the pocket on the left breast of his military uniform, where a Hero brand fountain pen, his treasured possession, was clipped. It was a gift from the old regimental commander after he distinguished himself in service. Without the slightest hesitation, I extended my right hand, still trembling and stained with my own blood, and with all my strength, thrust it fiercely toward the pocket on his chest. Ezra Gu had not anticipated my sudden attack at all. Caught off guard, I managed to grab the cap of that fountain pen. His face darkened instantly as he instinctively tried to shield it. Too late, I yanked it out with all my strength. Rip, with a faint sound of tearing fabric, the hefty Hero brand fountain pen was forcibly pulled from his pocket. Clutched tightly in my hand along with it was a neatly folded, slightly worn piece of paper, the divorce petition I had painstakingly written stroke by stroke under the dim kerosene lamp 2 nights ago. Enduring the dull ache in my stomach, every single word on it was soaked in the blood and tears of my past life. Ezra Gu felt a sudden chill on his chest. He looked down at the torn slit in his military uniform pocket, then raised his head in shock and fury. Mira Lin, have you lost your mind? Give me back my pen. I completely ignored his furious roar. My body ached so badly it nearly convulsed. and cold sweat soaked through the hospital gown on my back. I bit down hard on my lower lip, the metallic taste of blood flooding my mouth. Relying on the clarity that the blood brought, I mustered all my strength to stand firm. Then, under the shocked and furious gaze of Ezra Gu and the stunned stares from the neighboring hospital bed, I raised my hand, a hand stained with blood, clutching a pen and the divorce papers, lifted high. With every last ounce of strength I had left, fueled by the hatred of a past life shattered to pieces and the icy resolve of this one, I slammed it down, hard, mercilessly, onto the star insignia on Ezra Gu's chest, the symbol of his battalion commander's glory. Snap, a crisp yet dull impact sound exploded in the deathly silent hospital room, the cold metal epaulette dug painfully into my palm, the hard cap of the hero fountain pen, separated only by the thin sheet of divorce papers, struck heavily against the gleaming star insignia. Ezra Gu's tall frame was jolted by this sudden, forceful slap, causing him to stagger half a step back involuntarily. All the fury on his face instantly froze, transforming into blank astonishment as he stared at me in disbelief, as if seeing this frail, pale woman before him for the very first time. I gasped for breath, waves of excruciating pain surging from my lower abdomen, my vision flickering black, yet I straightened my spine. Though it trembled slightly from the agony, I lifted my head, meeting his shocked gaze with an expressionless face, cold as stagnant water. My lips quivered from blood loss and pain, but my voice came out clear, each word enunciated like an ice-coated nail. Ezra Gu, divorce. I pressed the crumpled, blood-stained divorce report, still damp with the blood from my palm, forcefully and resolutely onto his cold epaulette, as if driving it into his very bones and flesh. This child, my gaze swept over my flat yet still excruciatingly painful abdomen, where a tiny life had once grown, now leaving only a cold void and bone-deep hatred. My voice suddenly rose, carrying a sharpness that was almost cruel and a mocking tone of relief. Consider it, my debt repaid for taking care of your home. As the words fell, I abruptly withdrew my hand, clutching the cold hero fountain pen tightly in my palm, my knuckles turning white from the force. Without another glance at the mix of shock, fury, and a trace of bewilderment on Ezra Gu's face, I turned around, leaning against the icy wall. I moved step by step, my body racked with pain and resolve, toward the hospital room door. The thin hospital gown clung to my back, soaked in cold sweat, outlining my bony shoulder blades like the broken wings of a butterfly. Behind me, there was a deathly silence, only my labored, suppressed breaths and the shuffling sound of slippers against the floor remained. Ezra Gu stood rigidly in place, the torn fabric of his military uniform pocket dangling limply on his chest. The star insignia on his shoulder seemed to still bear the faint imprint of paper and a glaring, ominous dark red stain. He lowered his head to look at the crumpled sheet of paper forcibly stuffed into the seam of his shoulder insignia. The words divorce report on it burned like a red-hot brand. Searing his eyes with pain, he abruptly raised his head, staring at the frail figure leaning against the wall and struggling toward the door. A surge of overwhelming, indignant fury and an inexplicable panic seized him in an instant. How dare she? How could she be so resolute? This must be anger talking, a reckless outburst after the loss of their child. Mira Lin, he growled, like an enraged lion, taking a swift step forward. His large hand, with an unyielding force, suddenly clamped onto my arm. That hand was like an iron vice, instantly tightening around my slender arm, nearly crushing the bone. The immense strength, carrying his usual domineering possessiveness, sought to forcibly wrench me back. Have you had enough? His voice, barely containing thunderous rage, exploded in my ear, his scorching breath hitting the side of my neck, carrying the heavy scent of gunpowder and tobacco mixed together. Go back and lie down. Divorce. Do you even know what nonsense you're spouting? The excruciating pain in my arm and the cramping agony in my lower abdomen intertwined, plunging my vision into sudden darkness, nearly making me faint. The humiliation from my past life, being comforted by him time and again, repeatedly asked to understand, surged over me like a tidal wave, ultimately transforming into the boundless coldness of that fatal fall. Hatred, a torrent of hatred, like erupting magma, instantly overwhelmed all physical pain. Let go. I ground out the words through clenched teeth, my voice hoarse and icy, carrying the ferocity of a dying beast. I didn't turn around, only struggled violently, using every ounce of strength to break free from his grip. Ezra Gu, you fucking let her go right now. A thunderous roar suddenly erupted from the doorway of the hospital room. A man dressed in a faded work uniform, built like an iron tower, charged in like an enraged bull. His eyes bloodshot, it was Lin Daong, my only blood brother. He had just gotten off the night shift at the factory and rushed over in a panic after receiving a neighbor's urgent message. The moment he entered, he was met with a sight that made his vision blur with rage. His younger sister, who had just lost her child, was being held like a helpless chick by that high-on-lying battalion commander brother-in-law, her face as pale as paper, swaying unsteadily. Lin Daong's roar was like a sudden clap of thunder, shaking the entire hospital room. Without wasting a single word, he closed the distance in 2 strides, his massive hand like a fan swinging through the air with a whoosh, delivering a brutal punch straight at the arm Ezra Gu was using to grip me. His movements were swift and ruthless, carrying the raw, unyielding ferocity of a working-class man protecting his own at all costs. Bang! A dull thud of flesh striking flesh resounded. Ezra Gu, being a soldier, reacted with lightning speed. The moment Lin Daong's fist came crashing down, he instinctively released his grip on me, raising his arm to block and deflect most of the force. However, Lin Daong's furious strike was powerful and heavy. Caught off guard, Ezra Gu's arm still went numb from the impact, and his tall frame staggered backward involuntarily. Seizing this split-second opportunity, I twisted free like a slippery fish, breaking the last of my restraints. Completely off balance, I collapsed limply backward. Mira, Lin Daong acted swiftly, no longer paying attention to Ezra Gu. In a flash, he stepped forward and caught me firmly with his broad, sturdy chest and arms. A familiar scent, mingled with the smell of machine oil and sweat, enveloped me. It was the scent of my big brother. In my past life, when I was cornered by Lena Liu, it was my brother who secretly slipped me the food coupons and a few dollars he had saved, urging me to run. But in the end, I didn't escape. What happened to my brother afterward, I don't seem to remember. An overwhelming surge of sorrow and the grievance of having narrowly escaped death rushed up my nose, blurring my vision. I clutched the rough fabric of my brother's work shirt desperately, as if grasping the last floating piece of driftwood, my throat emitting stifled, broken sobs. Don't be afraid, I'm here, I'm here. Lin Daong held me tightly. Feeling the violent tremors of his sister's frail body and her suppressed cries, his heart nearly breaking, he suddenly looked up, his bloodshot eyes like 2 red-hot knives, glaring fiercely at Ezra Gu, who stood a few steps away with a livid face. His voice was hoarse and distorted with rage. Gu, are you even human? My sister just went through such a terrible ordeal. She lost the baby. Instead of protecting her, you're laying hands on her. Is this how you use those military medals of yours, to bully the women in your own home? Ezra Gu's face was so dark it seemed to drip with gloom. He rubbed his aching arm, still throbbing from Lin Daong's blow, the cold, hard gleam of the stars on his epaulets flickering under the light. His gaze shifted between his wife, trembling yet icy-eyed, shielded in Lin Daong's arms, and his brother-in-law, now a furious lion protecting his sister. A suffocating frustration and unspent rage churned violently in his chest. I didn't lay a hand on her. Ezra Gu's voice was restrained, carrying the cold rigidity of a soldier and a trace of frustration at being wronged. She pulled out the 4-needle and tried to run away herself. What do you mean just? Lin Daong didn't even let him explain, standing like an immovable wall in front of me, his eyes blazing with fury. Just held her. Bullshit, Battalion Commander Gu. Look at my sister's wrist, look at the blood on her hand, and look at her face. His anger grew with every word, his chest heaving violently. What did my sister marry you for? For your high rank, for your fat allowance. She worked herself to the bone taking care of your household, serving that poor, struggling widowed sister-in-law of yours. Now she's lost the baby, almost lost her life. And you're still here telling her to be considerate of others. Considerate my ass, Ezra Gu. Has your conscience been eaten by dogs? Lin Daong's roar was like a rapid-fire cannon, each word striking Ezra Gu in the face and weighing heavily on the hearts of everyone in the ward. The glances from the neighboring patient and their family toward Ezra Gu shifted, now filled with disdain and pity. Ezra Gu's face flushed and paled in turns, veins throbbing at his temples. He clenched his fists. His military pride made it unbearable to endure such public accusations. Especially the charge that he had mistreated his wife. He wanted to argue, to say he had never mistreated Mira Lin, that he had provided her with a comfortable life. In his view, that he had only wished for family harmony, hoped she could understand the difficulties of Sister Lena. But when his gaze met the cold, hollow eyes of the person in Lin Daong's arms, eyes brimming with deep-seated hatred and detachment, all his words of defense stuck in his throat. Those eyes were like bottomless icy pools, swirling with emotions utterly foreign to him, sending an inexplicable chill through his heart. Just then, a deliberately hushed, tearful female voice sounded at the ward door, carrying just the right note of fragility and distress. "Ezra, Mira, what's going on?" I heard Mira woke up, so I specially made some millet porridge and brought it over. "It's Lena Lou." She was wearing a slightly worn floral-patterned cotton jacket, her hair neatly combed. Her face bearing just the right amount of concern and pallor. Holding an aluminum lunchbox in her hand, she stood timidly at the doorway, her gaze sweeping over the tense atmosphere in the hospital room before finally settling on Ezra Gu. Her eyes instantly reddened, her voice trembling with emotion. "Ezra, are you okay? It's all my fault, all my fault. If I hadn't lost my balance this morning, none of this would have." Sister-in-law. Ezra Gu seemed to have found his anchor. Or perhaps was eager to escape the awkward situation. Immediately cutting off Lena Lou's self-reproach, his voice softened unconsciously. "It's not your fault, it was an accident." He took a step forward as if to take the lunchbox from her. Whooshing, I suddenly lifted my head from where I had been silently curled up in my elder brother's arms. My voice was soft, even weak, yet it pierced through the false warmth in the hospital room like a needle dipped in ice. Instantly, all eyes turned to me. I stared at Lena Lou's face, so full of innocence and self-reproach, at the fleeting glint of triumph and calculation deep in her eyes. In my past life, it was this very face, forever fragile and helpless in front of Ezra Gu, yet venomous as a viper in front of me. It was her who personally pushed me off the rooftop. A cold hatred, like poisonous vines, instantly coiled around my heart, squeezing until I could barely breathe. "Lena Lou," I looked at her. The corners of my mouth slowly curling into a frosty arc. There was not a trace of warmth in that smile, only bone-chilling mockery and an icy clarity that saw through everything. "Behind the memorial frame of your son Ji-jun, that roll of grain coupons tied with a red string, along with $5, was it the allowance Ezra Gu sent last month for my health?" My voice wasn't loud, but it struck like a thunderbolt, instantly crashing down upon Lena Lou's head. The worry and pallor on her face vanished in an instant, replaced by an ashen, deathly white. Her hand holding the lunchbox jerked violently, and the aluminum container clattered to the ground, spilling scalding millet porridge that splashed onto her feet. Like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, she shrieked, "You're lying, you're slandering me." "I didn't, Ezra, she's framing me." Her reaction was too intense, too abnormal, instantly betraying her guilt. Ezra Gu's outstretched hand froze midair as he reached for the lunchbox. He whipped his head around, staring in shock at Lena Lou, who had just screamed inappropriately, then turned to me with disbelief. "Food stamps, allowances, the money and coupons he sent home every month." Mira Lin had never once said they weren't enough. Could it be? An utterly absurd yet spine-chilling thought rose uncontrollably in his mind. Am I falsely accusing her? A simple search will prove it. I leaned weakly against my brother, my voice frail but my gaze sharp as a blade, locked onto Lena Lou's face, twisted with terror. "Underneath the cabinet by the Kong in your bedroom, in that biscuit tin wrapped in red paper. Besides the food stamps, there's also a Plum Blossom brand watch. That was my mother's dowry gift to me." "Lena Lou, do you dare let someone search for it?" Bang. Lena Lou seemed to have all the strength drained from her body. Her legs gave way, and she collapsed into the spilled porridge, trembling violently as if sibbed, her lips quivering without uttering a single word. Only a hoarse, death-rattle-like gasp escaped her throat. The sheer terror and despair in her eyes betrayed her completely. The evidence is irrefutable. The ward was deathly silent, with only the heavy, desperate gasps of Lena Lou breaking the stillness. Ezra Gu stood frozen like a petrified statue. His gaze shifted from Lena Lou, collapsed on the floor with a face drained of color, to the frail yet piercingly cold-eyed wife in my brother's arms, who seemed to see through everything. The insignia on his chest felt icy and unyielding, while the edges of the divorce papers he clutched unconsciously dug painfully into his palm. All the understanding, all the hardships, in this moment, were torn apart, revealing the most vile and ugly schemes beneath. Lin Daong tightened his embrace around me, glaring at Lena Lou, who was slumped on the floor, and Ezra Gu, standing rigidly. Through clenched teeth, he let out a heavy, disdainful snort. "Pa, what a bunch of trash." Without another glance at them, he carefully supported me, as if shielding a fragile treasure, his voice softening to a whisper. "Mira, Big Brother will take you away. We're not staying in this damned place any longer." I nodded weakly, burying my face in the crook of my brother's shoulder, which carried the faint scent of machine oil. and closed my eyes in exhaustion. My body ached numbly, but my heart was eerily calm, frozen in icy stillness. Ezra Gu stood rooted to the spot, watching helplessly as Lin Daong half-supported, half-carried me, step by step, struggling yet resolute, out of the hospital room. That frail silhouette vanished into the light and shadow at the doorway. Like a decisive line drawn in the sand, he lowered his head and opened his palm. In the palm of his hand lay the crumpled divorce report, stained with a faint, dark red, and a cold, metallic star insignia backplate, still carrying the lingering warmth from her fingertips. The force of that desperate slap had actually dislodged it from the shoulder strap, the icy metal pressed against his palm, its chill piercing to the bone. Outside the window, the leaden-gray sky of late autumn 1983 hung heavily over the city. Lin Daong pedaled his clunky old bicycle, the kind that rattled everywhere except the bell, with me perched carefully on the back seat, cushioned by the thick cotton jacket he had stubbornly insisted on taking off, still warm with his sweat. We jolted along the potholed factory road. We didn't return to that nauseating military family compound reeking of Lena Lu's presence. Instead, we went straight to the shabby, low-lying residential area behind the cotton mill. This was Lin Daong's home, a small red brick house no more than a dozen square meters, its walls blackened by coal smoke, with stacks of honeycomb briquettes and chopped firewood piled by the door. Mira, we're home, watch your step. Lin Daong parked the bike and lifted me off the back seat with a gentleness so cautious it bordered on clumsiness, as if handling a porcelain doll that might shatter at the slightest touch. The room was cramped but tidy, an old wooden bed, a chipped square table, 2 stools. The air carried a faint mix of coal smoke and the scent of a man living alone, pungent, yet oddly comforting in its own way. Bro, I'll stay here, sis-in-law. I leaned against the headboard, wrapped in the old patched but clean quilt my elder brother had dug out, my voice weak. Don't mention her. Lin Daong was squatting by the stove, poking at the fire, his tone brusque as he spoke without turning his head. Divorced that gold-digging woman long ago. This place is just me now, nice and quiet. You stay here and focus on getting better. That's what matters. The flames leaped up, orange and lively under his prodding, driving away the late autumn chill. He didn't press for details about the hospital, nor did he mention Ezra Gu or Lena Lu. Silently, he stoked the fire, then rummaged through the cabinets, pulling out half a bag of noodles, 2 eggs, and a small lump of lard, hardened in a tin can. Make do with this for now. I'll see if I can get some meat from the store tomorrow. He placed a bowl of clear noodle soup before me, topped with a poached egg and glistening with oil. His rough fingers fidgeted awkwardly against his faded work pants. The steam from the noodles made my eyes sting with unshed tears. In my past life, when Ezra Gu demanded that I'd be considerate of Lena Lu, forcing me to huddle by a cold stove chewing on stale buns. Did my elder brother also worry about his hopeless little sister from some forgotten corner? Brother, my throat tightened painfully. Eat. Lin Daong shoved the chopsticks into my hand with an air of finality. Don't think about anything else. If the sky falls, your brother will hold it up for you. The days flowed slowly and laboriously, marked by the crackling of the stove fire and the rising steam from the noodles, while the physical wounds gradually healed. The gaping hole torn ruthlessly in my heart let in an unending, icy wind that held day and night. During the day, Lin Daong sweated profusely in the machine repair workshop, and after work, he would bury himself in the kitchen, clumsily figuring out how to turn the limited ration coupons into something nutritious. Somehow, he managed to get a small packet of brown sugar and would unfailingly make me a bowl of it every day. He also asked his co-workers to exchange eggs for him on the black market several times, but he never ate a single one himself. Instead, he buried them all at the bottom of my bowl. Once I could move a little, I began tidying up the small room. At the very bottom of a dusty, old wooden crate stuffed with newspapers and miscellaneous items, I found a small, heavy bundle wrapped in blue cloth. Unwrapping the blue cloth revealed several old books with yellowed pages and dog-eared corners. The one on top was self-study series for mathematics, physics, and chemistry, high school edition. Beneath it lay a thin copy of the Barefoot Doctor Manual and a stack of neatly cut, hemp thread-bound blank papers, their edges already yellowed and brittle. As my fingertips brushed over the familiar rough texture of the paper, my heart felt as if it were being squeezed by an icy hand. In my past life, during countless nights when I endured Lena Lu's cruelty and Ezra Gu's neglect. In the cold, unwelcoming room of the military family compound, ostensibly the home of Battalion Commander Gu's wife, but more like a servant's quarters, These secretly hidden old books and notes had been my only solace and escape. How I had longed to stand on my own, like the women in white coats described in those books, relying on my own skills. But that faint spark was ultimately extinguished by the identity and responsibilities of being Mrs. Gu, by Lena Lu's endless harassment, and by Ezra Gu's repeated reassurances to just stay at home and rest easy. Between the pages of the book lay a palm-sized old photograph. The girl in the picture wore a faded blue cotton jacket, her 2 jet black braids tied neatly, standing beneath the old locust tree at County No. 1 High School. Her smile was shy yet radiant, her eyes brimming with hope for the future. That was 17-year-old Mira Lynn, who had just received her high school admission letter. On the back of the photo, 2 lines of delicate yet forceful handwriting in fountain pen read, "Knowledge changes destiny. Mira Lynn, you must go out into the world." Tears surged without warning, large drops falling onto the yellowed photograph, leaving dark, spreading stains. Get out, the path I couldn't take in my past life. This time, even if I have to crawl, I'll crawl my way out. I pressed the photo tightly to my chest. The cold tears trickled into the corners of my mouth, bitter and astringent. Yet they seemed to inject one last surge of strength into my parched soul. "Brother," I said that evening, as Lin Daon chewed on his cornbread with pickles, pointing at the old books on the table. My voice was calm but carried an undeniable force. "Help me dig these out. I want to read them." Lin Daon froze for a moment, glancing at the tattered books and then at my pale yet resolute face. A flicker of something complex passed through his clouded eyes. He didn't ask why, just gave a firm nod and stuffed the last bite of cornbread into his mouth. "All right, tomorrow, I'll clean up the table nice and bright for you." The difficulty of reviewing far exceeded my expectations. My body hadn't fully recovered yet, and prolonged sitting caused a dull ache in my lower abdomen. The living conditions in the Cotton Mills residential area were rudimentary, with unstable voltage causing the dim yellow light bulb to flicker constantly. In the depths of winter, the only source of warmth in the room was a coal stove. Sitting at the desk to study, my hands and feet would grow numb from the cold, forcing me to place a hot water bottle on my knees for warmth. My knowledge had become terrifyingly rusty. High school algebra formulas, chemical equations, physical theorems. After more than a decade of hardship in my previous life, they had all blurred into a chaotic haze. Opening the textbooks, those once familiar symbols and words now seemed alien and impenetrable. But I had no way back. The glow from the stove illuminated the open books and my focused profile. The pencil scratched across the rough draft paper as I worked through calculations repeatedly, only to start over again and again. When stuck on a problem, I would frown deeply, my lips pressed together until they turned pale, persisting late into the night. When exhaustion overwhelmed me, I would splash cold water on my face or pinch my thigh hard. Lin Daon didn't understand these things, but he silently supported me. He borrowed a few old reference books from the factory library through acquaintances. He unraveled the work gloves issued by the factory and knitted me a pair of fingerless wool gloves. He saved money from his cigarette expenses and occasionally went to the black market to exchange for a small packet of white sugar, which he dissolved in water for me to drink, saying it would nourish my brain. Time slipped quietly through winter and spring amid the scratching of my pen and the howling north wind outside the window. In the scorching heat of July, the day of the college entrance exams finally arrived. The exam venue was set at City No. 1 High School. Lin Daon took a day off specifically, waking up before dawn to pedal me over 10 miles on his rickety bicycle, dressed in his best, faded blue work uniform. He stood like a silent mountain under the scorching shade of the trees outside the exam hall. As the final bell of the last exam rang, I followed the crowd out of the examination hall, the glaring sunlight making it hard to keep my eyes open. Lin Daon immediately rushed up to me, his dark, sweat-covered face filled with tension. "Mira, how was it? Are you tired? Did you do okay?" Looking at the wrinkles on his forehead soaked with sweat, at the pure, unadulterated concern and anxiety in his eyes, my nerves, strained for days, suddenly relaxed. An overwhelming exhaustion and an indescribable bitterness welled up in my heart. I shook my head slightly, my voice hoarse from not speaking for a long time and carrying a barely detectable sob. "Bro, I did my best." What followed was a long and agonizing wait. One early August day, the incessant cicada chirps were grating on my nerves. I was sitting on a small stool by the door, reading my dog-eared copy of the Barefoot Doctor's Manual in the daylight, when Lin Daon burst in like a whirlwind, drenched in sweat, clutching a pale yellow sheet of paper, his face twisted with overwhelming excitement. His voice cracked and trembled uncontrollably. Mira, Mira, a letter. The letter has arrived, with a big red seal, the capital. It's from the capital. My heart skipped a beat, then began pounding so violently it ached in my chest. I sprang to my feet. And the manual fell to the ground with a thud. Lin Daong rushed up to me, thrusting the letter into my hands. His thick fingers trembled as they pointed to the bright red sender's stamp at the bottom right corner of the envelope. Look, look, Capital Medical University, Department of Clinical Medicine. It's an admission letter. Mira, my dear girl, you got in, you got in. The pale yellow envelope felt heavy in my hand. Emblazoned on it were the solemn school emblem and the bold characters spelling out Capital Medical University. In the lower right corner, the bright red words admission notice and the official seal burned like a flame against my fingertips. My fingers trembled so much I could barely hold the thin envelope. Taking a deep breath, I mustered all my strength to tear it open and pull out the notice inside, which bore the same bright red emblem and lettering, Student Mira Lin. After review and approval, you have been admitted to the clinical medicine department of our university. The words that followed blurred and wavered in my vision. An overwhelming, indescribable surge of heat rushed to my head, drowning all my senses. In my ears, Lin Daong's ecstatic, incoherent shouts mingled with the deafening sound of my own heartbeat. Everything before me began to spin, and the sunlight grew unbearably bright. The howling wind when I was pushed off the building in my past life, the brown sugar water brought by Ezra Gu in the hospital, the hypocritical tears of Lena Liu, the dried noodles handed to me by my elder brother's rough palms, the rustling sound of my frozen fingers scribbling calculations on draft paper in the cold winter nights. Countless fragments of memories flashed and collided before my eyes like shards. Brother. I opened my mouth, wanting to say something. But my throat felt blocked by a searing iron, unable to utter a sound. The icy pillar of hatred and resentment that had supported me for an entire year within my body crumbled in that instant. Darkness enveloped my vision, and the world spun wildly. Mira, the last moment before losing consciousness was Lin Daong's terrified cry, and his solid, warm embrace that carried the scent of sweat and engine oil. Provincial City, Military District Auditorium. The brilliantly lit auditorium was as bright as day. A massive red banner hung above the stage, warmly celebrating the complete success of the XX Military District Summer Competition and Commendation Ceremony. Below, rows of officers in crisp military uniforms, adorned with various ranks, sat solemnly and proudly. Ezra Gu sat in the middle of the front row, the stars on his epaulets gleaming under the lights, as the outstanding battalion commander of the armored unit in this major competition. He had just received the third-class merit medal and certificate from the senior officer. Thunderous applause erupted, and camera flashes lit up the room. He stood up, saluting the entire audience with a crisp military gesture, his posture as straight as a pine tree, his face bearing the calm and restrained pride unique to a soldier. As the assembly neared its end, the atmosphere relaxed. A staff member from the military district's propaganda department, carrying a stack of freshly arrived newspapers, cheerfully distributed them to the leaders in the front row. Commander, Political Commissar, the latest provincial newspaper is here. The front page headline is about a major celebration in our province. The old political commissar chuckled as he took the newspaper and unfolded it. His eyes habitually scanned the bold headline on the front page, and his smile faltered slightly before transforming into unmistakable surprise and admiration. Oh, this is remarkable. This year's provincial top scorer in the science stream of the college entrance exam has been announced, and it's a young woman. Her total score, this high, impressive, truly impressive, and she's heading to Capital Medical University, a future angel in white. The old political commissar's voice boomed with genuine praise. His words immediately caught the attention of several senior officers nearby, who gathered around to take a look. Is that so? Let me see. Mira Lin. That name sounds somewhat familiar. A deputy commander adjusted his glasses. Mira Lin, Zhao Mingde, the regiment's political commissar sitting next to Ezra Gu, subconsciously repeated the name, then suddenly remembered something, his expression turning peculiar as he quickly glanced at Ezra Gu beside him. Ezra Gu, who had been basking in the joy of his achievements and the relaxation of the meeting nearing its end, felt his heart clench violently as if gripped by an invisible hand the moment he heard the name Mira Lin. Impossible. It must just be someone with the same name. How could she, a housewife who didn't even finish middle school, possibly? He almost forced himself to maintain a calm exterior, yet his gaze involuntarily, with a hint of barely perceptible urgency, drifted toward the old political commissar's newspaper. On the front page of the provincial newspaper, a somewhat grainy black and white photo occupied a prominent position. The girl in the photo wore a faded floral-patterned shirt, her hair tied in a simple ponytail. Her face was lean but sharply defined, her eyes calmly meeting the camera's lens, with a faint, almost imperceptible smile at the corners of her lips, a serenity that seemed to pierce through the dust of time. Beneath the photo, a bold, black headline stood out. From humble origins to excellence, our province's top science student, Mira Lin, gains admission to Capital Medical University with outstanding results. Subtitle: Textile mill worker rises from adversity, pens a new chapter of destiny. Mira Lin, it's really her. Ezra Gu felt as if all the blood in his body had frozen in an instant. The joy of his achievement and the glory of the assembly shattered like fragile glass under this sudden blow. He stared fixedly at the black and white photograph, at those calm, almost unfamiliar eyes. That face bore the familiar contours he knew, yet it felt so alien, stripped of the docility and timidity from his memories. All that remained was a rock-like resilience and an icy detachment. A female textile worker, reborn from adversity, top science student, Capital Medical University. Each word struck like a heavy hammer, shattering his perception. That Mira Lin whom he had asked to be considerate of others, whom he believed couldn't survive without him. That Mira Lin whom he had tacitly allowed Lena Lu to bully time and again, only for her to resolutely demand a divorce from her sickbed. An overwhelming sense of absurdity and an indescribable panic surged over him like icy tides, drowning him instantly. He felt his breath halt, the laughter and applause of the senior officers around him seemed muffled and distant, as if separated by a thick pane of frosted glass. Only the calm face in the newspaper and those cold, printed words remained vividly imprinted on his retinas, searing his nerves. The commendation ceremony concluded amidst the stirring strains of military music. Officers congratulated one another and filed out of the auditorium in small groups, the atmosphere buzzing with excitement. Ezra Gu sat like a soulless statue, rigid in his chair, clutching the third-class merit certificate so tightly that his knuckles turned white, its edges crumpled under his grip. The provincial newspaper had been quietly slipped into his hand by political commissar Zhao Mingde, battalion commander Gu. Zhao Mingde's voice sounded beside him, laced with a hint of complicated sigh. Is this really your wife? The divorce, is it finalized? Ezra Gu snapped back to reality, his throat so parched he couldn't utter a single syllable. Wife, divorce, the words rang bitterly ironic in his ears. He rose almost clumsily to his feet, grabbed the newspaper, and without even a word of farewell, stumbled out of the clamorous auditorium. Outside, the summer night breeze carried the lingering heat of the day, yet it brought him no warmth, only a bone-chilling cold. He didn't know how he made it back to the barracks, nor how he ended up sitting at his cold desk, trembling hands dialing the number of the public phone in the Cotton Mills residential area over and over. The endless busy tone was like a dull knife sawing through flesh. Finally, after who knows how many attempts, the call connected. A gruff male voice with a thick local accent came through. Hello, who are you looking for? I'm looking for Mira Lin from the cotton mill. Ezra Gu's voice was hoarse and urgent. Mira Lin. The man on the other end paused. Oh, that Mira Lin who got into university. She's long gone. She's a golden phoenix that's flown to the highest branch now. Went off to study in the capital. Left days ago. Click. The receiver slipped from Ezra Gu's hand and landed heavily on the desk. Capital Medical University. The provincial newspaper bearing her photo felt like a red-hot branding iron, searing his heart. The person he had so easily abandoned, the one he assumed would always remain waiting, had already flown away without a backward glance, soaring to heights he could never reach or even imagine. An unprecedented, immense emptiness and panic seized him. It was as if the solid ground beneath his feet had suddenly collapsed, revealing a bottomless void. No, he abruptly stood up, his eyes surging with a near-delusional madness. He couldn't lose her like this. He had to go find her. She must just be acting out of spite. In her heart, she must still care for him. This thought, like a lifeline, instantly seized all his reason. The leave request was submitted at lightning speed, with a flimsy excuse. Regimental Political Commissar Zhao Mingde looked at his usually reliable subordinate, now with bloodshot eyes and clearly in an abnormal state, hesitated to speak, but ultimately sighed and signed off on the report. 2 days later, Ezra Gu stood at the grand, time-honored gates of Capital Medical University, covered in the dust of travel. He had changed out of his military uniform into a slightly worn gray Zhongshan suit, trying to make himself less conspicuous. Yet his soldierly posture and the unshakable air of sternness between his brows still made him stand out starkly against the scholarly surroundings. His fists were clenched, palms slick with cold sweat. The carefully folded newspaper clipping tucked in his inner pocket felt like a branding iron, searing his heart with anxiety. He kept imagining the scene of meeting Mira Lin. Would she be surprised to see him after his long journey? Would she be resentful? Would she, like before, throw herself into his arms? He rehearsed his apologies over and over in his mind, even preparing explanations about Lena Lu and promises of a better future. Time crawled by in agonizing slowness as he waited. The setting sun cast a golden edge over the ancient university gates, stretching Ezra Gu's solitary figure into a long shadow. At last, as the final streak of sunset was about to sink below the horizon, several figures emerged from the school gate. Among them was a slender, tall figure dressed in a simple white shirt and dark blue trousers, carrying a faded canvas backpack. She was tilting her head slightly, engaged in a quiet conversation with a bespectacled, scholarly-looking middle-aged man beside her. It was Mira Lin. Ezra Gu's heart leaped into his throat. Almost instinctively, he straightened his back and took a step forward, ready to call out the name that had lingered on the tip of his tongue countless times. Yet, in the next moment, he caught a clear glimpse of Mira Lin's face. The soft, yellowish glow of the streetlights gently illuminated the scene. Her face had grown noticeably thinner, shedding the last traces of youthful innocence from his memory, its contours now clear and delicate. Her complexion was a bookish pallor, untouched by sunlight for far too long. What startled him most was her gaze, calm, profound, like the undisturbed surface of an autumn lake. There was none of the surprise, grievance, or resentment he had anticipated, not even the slightest ripple. She looked at him as if he were a tree by the roadside, a stone, or a complete stranger. She was slightly tilting her head, listening intently to the middle-aged scholar beside her, her lips even curving into a faint, polite, and attentive smile. That serene, absorbed demeanor was something Ezra Gu had never seen in her before. It was as though her entire being was immersed in a world he could neither comprehend nor reach. A chilling cold surged from the soles of his feet, spreading through his entire body, shattering all his preconceptions and rehearsed words into fragments. Mira Lin. The words tore from his throat almost instinctively, his voice hoarse and strained, laced with an urgency and panic he hadn't even realized he felt. Under the halo of the streetlight, Mira Lin's footsteps came to a halt. She turned her head toward the sound. The dim yellow light cast faint shadows on her face, clearly revealing her expression. Calm, only an unfathomable calm. Those eyes, once brimming with his presence, now clearly reflected Ezra Gu's travel-worn and slightly disheveled figure. Yet not a single ripple was stirred. The bespectacled scholar beside her also stopped, glancing at Ezra Gu with some confusion before turning to look at Mira Lin. Ezra Gu felt a pang of unease under the gaze of those tranquil eyes. He instinctively straightened his posture, trying to reclaim a sense of control. His Adam's apple bobbed with difficulty as he spoke in a low, hurried voice, carrying an undeniable tone of command yet betraying a barely perceptible tremor. "Come home with me." Under the dim streetlight, Ezra Gu's figure cast a long shadow on the mottled ground. His slightly worn Zhongshan suit couldn't conceal the straight posture of a soldier, yet his shoulders seemed slightly weighed down by an invisible burden. Standing at the school gate, he resembled an abrupt boundary marker, blocking the path to the temple of knowledge. "Come home with me," for words, hoarse, urgent, carrying the exhaustion of a 1,000-mile journey, yet also bearing the unyielding authority ingrained in his bones, as if this were merely the finale of a farce. And now that he had arrived, she should obediently set everything aside and follow. Mira Lin's footsteps barely faltered, not even a crack appearing in her expression. Her deep, pool-like eyes clearly reflected Ezra Gu's figure. Yet it was as if she were looking at a roadside stone, utterly unmoved. She didn't even glance at his outstretched hand, calloused with faint traces of labor. Her gaze swept past him calmly, as though he were nothing but air. Then, with perfect naturalness, she turned slightly toward the bespectacled, scholarly middle-aged man beside her. Her voice was neither loud nor soft, but steady and clear, carrying an air of complete focus and just the right measure of politeness. "Professor Zhou, regarding the critical value issue in the serum separation of the experimental control group you mentioned earlier, I reviewed several sets of data again last night and noticed a slight time difference variable between the third and seventh groups during the separation process. It might have a potential impact on the significance of the results. The data logbook is in my bag. Would you prefer to review it together in the lab now? Or should I compile a summary and leave it on your desk first thing tomorrow morning? Her speech was steady, her articulation clear, and the professional terms she mentioned left Ezra completely baffled. The focused immersion, the natural thirst for knowledge she displayed when facing her mentor, formed the cruelest contrast with the icy indifference she showed when looking at him. Professor Zhou was clearly also taken aback by the sudden go-home command. But he was quickly drawn in by the professional question Mira Lin raised. Adjusting his glasses, a glimmer of approval flashed in his eyes. Oh, time lag variables, you're very observant, Mira Lin. Now, well, he instinctively glanced at his wristwatch, then stole a look at Ezra Gu, who stood frozen under the streetlight with a livid expression, seeming somewhat awkward. It's a bit late now. The lab building. Data waits for no one, Professor. Mira Lin's voice remained calm, yet carried an undeniable insistence. Especially subtle variables like these, they could directly impact the credibility of the entire experimental model. I can have a preliminary analysis ready tonight. As she spoke, she was already unzipping her canvas backpack, preparing to pull out her notebook. She completely ignored Ezra Gu's presence, treating him like nothing more than an inconvenient nuisance. A surge of anger from being utterly scorned and the agony of being gnawed by immense panic, like two venomous snakes, instantly coiled tightly around Ezra Gu's heart. He watched Mira Lin, completely absorbed in academic matters, not even sparing him a glance, and saw the focused expression she directed at that so-called professor. The image of her docile and forbearing face from their past life clashed violently in his mind with her current icy, frosty profile. Mira Lin. Ezra Gu suddenly took a step forward, his tall figure exuding an overwhelming sense of pressure, almost blocking their path. His crimson eyes bore into her, his voice hoarse and distorted by extreme emotion, carrying a hint of desperation on the verge of losing control and a last shred of forced authority. I'm talking to you. Come back with me, whatever it is, we'll discuss it at home. He had finally torn off that facade of forced calm, revealing the anxiety beneath, and a barely perceptible plea. Mira Lin finally, truly, looked at him. The gaze was so calm it sent a chill through the heart. She slowly, ever so slightly furrowed her brows, as if pondering an insignificant obstacle. Then, she spoke with utter detachment, her voice not loud but sharp as an ice-forged blade, cleanly slicing through the dim yellow of the night. Comrade Commander. She even used that title which once signified his glory, now leaving only the cold irony of distance. Excuse me. She turned slightly, her arm moving with natural, protective grace to lightly steady the somewhat flustered Professor Zhou beside her, a gesture both smooth and polite. I'm rushing to finish the experimental data. As her words fell, she didn't spare Ezra Gu another glance, as if he were merely an insignificant obstacle by the roadside, supporting Professor Zhou. The two of them effortlessly sidestepped his rigid form, walking with composed steps toward the brightly lit laboratory building. The sound of high heels striking the ground was crisp, steady, each tap like an icy drumbeat, pounding heavily on Ezra Gu's already battered heart. She was gone. Right in front of him, she supported another man and walked away without even looking back, all for some damned experimental data. A massive, overwhelming panic of being utterly abandoned and a furious rage that crushed all his dignity surged over Ezra Gu like a tsunami. The dam of reason completely collapsed. Mira Lin, stop right there. He let out a beast-like growl, his crimson eyes fixed solely on that resolute retreating figure. His body reacted before his mind could, and like a frenzied panther, he lunged forward, reaching out to grab Mira Lin's arm. He couldn't let her leave, he had to bring her back. Just as his calloused fingers were about to touch Mira Lin's arm, Mira Lin seemed to have eyes on the back of her head. Her steps didn't falter in the slightest, nor did she even turn around. The hand that had been lightly supporting Professor Zhou dropped naturally to her side, then slipped into the faded canvas bag's side pocket. Then, with a slight flick of her wrist, an object traced a brief, icy silver arc under the dim streetlight, accompanied by a faint whistling sound, flying straight toward Ezra Gu's face with deadly precision. Ezra Gu instinctively reached out to grab it. The object felt cold and hard in his hand, with the distinctive weight of metal. He reflexively opened his palm. Under the dim yellow glow of the streetlight, the object in his hand was clearly illuminated, a pen, a Hero brand fountain pen, the body is coated in the familiar dark green lacquer, from prolonged use. The gold plating on the cap's edge has worn off, revealing a dull copper color. On the clip, a tiny GZ is engraved, the initials of his name. This was awarded to him personally by the regimental commander after he distinguished himself on the Laoshan front line. He once treasured it immensely, but later, it seems after an argument, Mira Lin, her eyes red, took it from him, saying she wanted to keep it as a memento, and now, this old pen, which carried the weight of bygone years and what he thought was some kind of sentimental attachment, was casually tossed back to him as if it were trash, the cold metal pressed against his palm, its chill piercing to the bone. Ezra Gu seemed to have been struck by a paralysis spell, freezing abruptly in place. All movement, all his roars, all his fury and panic were utterly frozen in that moment, his bloodshot eyes fixed unblinkingly on the worn old pen in his palm, as though he were seeing it clearly for the first time. The faded gold plating, the dull lacquer, like a cruel mirror. It vividly reflected the self-deluded past he had clung to and the wretched present he now faced. The sound of Mira Lin supporting Professor Zhou as they walked away had already faded into the bright lights and shadows of the laboratory building, only he remained, standing alone under the dim yellow street lamp at the school gate, like a complete and utter joke abandoned by the world. The night wind blew, rustling a few fallen leaves on the ground, creating a soft, whispering sound. Ezra Gu slowly, very slowly, closed his hand, the cold, old fountain pen pressed tightly against his palm, the pain searing into his very soul. He lowered his head, staring at the cold metallic glint in his palm. The street lamp pinned his long, solitary shadow onto the icy concrete ground, like an abandoned statue slowly weathering away. That cold Herobrand pen felt like a scorching bullet shell, wedged mercilessly into Ezra Gu's palm. The dim yellow light blurred the worn marks on the pen's surface. Yet the engraved letters GZ burned vividly onto his retinas, stinging his eyes with pain. Mira Lin, you, he wanted to roar, to demand answers, to rush forward and seize that resolute figure disappearing into the shadows of the laboratory building, but his throat felt clogged with sandpaper, only able to emit broken, voiceless gasps. His outstretched hand froze mid-air, fingertips retaining the phantom touch of her sleeve brushing past, a cold so sharp it pierced to the bone. The bright glass windows of the lab building resembled indifferent eyes, reflecting his current wretchedness, an utterly expelled, insignificant obstacle from her world. The occasional passing students cast curious yet wary glances, their hushed whispers like fine needles pricking at his proud military dignity. Excuse me, I'm rushing lab data. That calm, almost cruel voice echoed in his ears over and over. No hysteria, no bitter accusations, just an icy indifference that had completely erased him from her life. She couldn't even be bothered to waste a shred of emotion on him anymore. A tremendous, unprecedented panic seized Ezra Gu's heart, worse than staring down the barrel of a gun. Only then did he truly realize, the Mira Lin who had once obediently waited in the family quarters, cooked for him, and been told to be understanding of everyone, that Mira Lin was truly dead. She had died on the cold operating table, in the cup of hypocritical brown sugar water he'd handed her, and at the bottom of the high-rise where Lena Lu had pushed her. The one alive now was Capital Medical University's Mira Lin, the top science student Mira Lin. Her world consisted solely of cold lab data, rigorous academic debates, and a future he could neither comprehend nor hope to reach. And he, Ezra Gu, a young battalion commander who had just been awarded a third-class merit and had a promising future, became a complete joke in her eyes, in front of her Professor Zhou, and in the bright world she was running toward. A suppressed, almost dying beast-like gasp escaped from the depths of his chest. He clenched his fist abruptly, the hard cap of the old pen digging deep into the flesh of his palm, bringing a sharp sting. Strangely, this pain dulled the more overwhelming, more desperate tearing sensation in his heart. He couldn't collapse here, not like a discarded, resentful husband, losing his composure at the gates of this sacred institution. Ezra Gu forced himself to straighten his back, which had momentarily hunched. The military discipline ingrained in his bones kicked in at this moment, though it flickered like a candle in the wind. Slowly, with extreme stiffness, he turned around and took heavy steps, his legs feeling as if they were filled with lead, step by step, leaving behind the area bathed in streetlight yet chilling him to the bone. Each step felt like treading on burning coals. Behind her, the brightly lit laboratory building cast glaring light from another world. Capital Medical University, girls' dormitory. Under the dim glow of a desk lamp, Mira Lin spread open the hefty pathophysiology, where densely packed notes on the pages served as her weapons against forgetting in time. The tip of her pen scratched softly against the paper. Steady and focused, the dorm was quiet, save for the faint rustling of pages turned by her roommate. Mira Lin, a lively Beijing girl with a ponytail from the clinical bunk, leaned over and whispered, "That man downstairs just now, the one in the Zhongshan suit who looked really stern, he was looking for you, wasn't he? Do you know him?" Mira Lin's pen tip didn't pause, her gaze still fixed on the intricate pathological mechanism diagram, her voice flat and unemotional, as if stating a fact that had nothing to do with her, an insignificant person from the past. The girl grew even more curious. From the looks of it, he seemed like a soldier, his aura was terrifying, as if he wanted to devour someone. Mira Lin finally raised her head, the dim light casting faint shadows on her slender face, the corners of her lips curved ever so slightly upward. But the smile held no warmth, only a trace of worldly detachment and a barely perceptible hint of mockery. Used to be a soldier." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the heavy night outside the window, then added in a voice as light as a feather falling to the ground, "A soldier, who was used to giving orders." She didn't say another word, lowering her head again and immersing herself back into the world of her book. As if the encounter at the school gate, one that could shatter all the dignity of a proud man, had merely been a wisp of wind brushing the water's surface, leaving not even a ripple behind. Her roommate, looking at her calm profile, inexplicably felt a chill and shrank her neck slightly, wisely choosing not to press further. Military district, Ezra Gu's dormitory. The room was thick with the heavy scent of tobacco. The curtains were tightly drawn, shutting out the outside light. Ezra Gu didn't turn on the lamp, merely leaning against the cold wall, a few twisted cigarette butts scattered at his feet, the crimson embers flickering in the darkness. He clutched the Hero brand fountain pen tightly in his hand, his knuckles turning white from the strain. The cold metal had long been warmed by his body heat, yet it still couldn't dispel the bone-deep chill in his heart. Mira Lin, Mira Lin. He murmured the name unconsciously, his voice hoarse and dry. Before his eyes flashed the resolute look in her eyes as she pulled out the 4 and signed the divorce papers in the hospital bed, the indifference in her voice as she calmly said "excuse me" while supporting the professor at the school gate, the serene yet unfamiliar face in the newspaper, along with the glaring words "top science student" and "Capital Medical University." He was wrong, terribly wrong, beyond redemption. What understanding, what bigger picture? What? It's not easy for a widow with orphans. All were just fig leaves he used to cover up his own cowardice and favoritism. It was his own hands that, through repeated acts of understanding, pushed the woman who had given him her whole heart into an icy abyss, and then personally extinguished her last glimmer of hope. He thought she couldn't live without him. As a result, he left her. And even his soul could find no place to return. Thud, a muffled sound. It was the sound of a fist slamming hard onto the unyielding concrete floor. The excruciating pain in his knuckles was nothing compared to the agony in his heart. In the darkness, Ezra Gu's bloodshot eyes stared fixedly into the void. Within them surged towering waves of regret, mingled with the fury of being utterly rejected and abandoned, ultimately settling into a silent despair. He grabbed the opened bottle of strong liquor from the floor and tilted his head back, gulping it down fiercely. The burning liquid scorched his throat, making him cough violently as tears welled up reflexively. He didn't care, clutching it like a lifeline, drinking even more desperately, trying to numb his shattered heart with the searing pain. I don't know how much time had passed when the wine bottle rolled to the ground, emitting a hollow sound. Ezra Gu's tall frame was curled up in the cold corner, his head buried deep in the crook of his arm, his shoulders shaking uncontrollably, suppressed. Wounded animal-like sobs echoed faintly in the deathly silent room. No tears, only broken, desperate wails rising from his throat. Cotton Mill residential area, Lin Daong's home. Under the dim yellow light bulb, Lin Daong carefully placed a brand new remittance slip beneath the glass tabletop, next to a photo of Mira Lin in a white lab coat, taken at the entrance of the medical school. In the photo, his younger sister's eyes were bright, her smile serene yet full of strength. "Brother, this month's allowance has come in, I've sent you half, don't skimp, eat well and buy what you need, everything's fine here. The professor thinks highly of me and even let me join an important research project." The letter bore Mira Lin's neat, strong handwriting. Lin Daong's rough fingers traced over his sister's face in the photo, then brushed against the money order. His clouded eyes glistened as a simple, honest smile spread across his lips. He walked to the doorway. took a deep breath of the cold, coal-smoke-laden night air, and felt a surge of energy coursing through him. Next door, Lena Lou's shrill cries and curses mingled with the wails of a child, punctuated by words like ungrateful wretch, heartless, and serves you right. Ever since Mira Lynn got into university and news of Ezra Gu's divorce spread, Lena Lou's life had taken a turn for the worse, though the theft of food coupons and a watch never made it to court. The scandal was common knowledge in the factory's residential compound, where gossip could drown a person. The Gu family had cut all ties with her, even taking away Ji-jun. Now she was truly alone, her reputation in tatters, scraping by on meager earnings as a street sweeper for the factory, her bitterness growing by the day. Lin Daong listened to the hysterical shrieking, spat in disdain, and slammed the door shut, blocking out the nauseating noise. He hummed a tuneless little ditty, carefully scooping a bit of lard from the tin can, ready to fry himself an egg to celebrate his sister sending money home again. The firelight reflected off his dark, honest face, warm and reassuring. In the brightly lit laboratory of Capital Medical University, Mira Lynn, dressed in a pristine white lab coat, was intently adjusting the microscope's focus. In her field of vision, the microscopic world was both magnificent and precise. Brimming with unsolved mysteries, outside the window, the biting chill of early spring in 1984 lingered, yet it couldn't dispel the fervent thirst for knowledge within those walls. Her journey had only just begun. On that path, the shadow once named Ezra Gu was no longer there.